Be in the know with unlimited access to IBJ and Inside Indiana Business. Our in-depth coverage of all things business means you'll always be completely in the know. Subscribe for just $1 a week. Get started now at ibj.com/trial offer.
Hello and welcome to a special bonus edition of the Business and Beyond podcast presented by PNC. I'm Gerry Dick. As Indiana Governor Mike Braun approaches 9 months in office, I recently sat down with him for an extended interview on a wide range of topics, from aggressive property tax reform to his overhaul of the state's economic development efforts, to his stance on the surge in data center projects around the state. Here now, my conversation with Governor Braun. Governor, you've been in office now 9 months. Your assessment on the state of the Indiana economy?
So the state of our Indiana economy was always good relative to our peer group of Midwestern states. And that's because we're an enterprising state. We got an excellent business climate. And then you're always dealing with issues that come that impact you maybe from afar. Let's just go back to, say, COVID. You know, it was the government shutting down business that impacted every state differently for a short period of time until they had their hands around what it really was. Indiana probably navigated through that, okay. Some businesses, were maybe overly cautious with it. And I think they regret that now. I mean, some of the things we had to do to get our kids educated, but that's hindsight. We came through all that. So we have the attributes that if we stick with them and to me be a little more enterprising with them, we can chart our own course. And I do believe the dynamic has switched from the federal government to state governments that are going to have more meaning and input in our economies. And I think that reverberates on a national basis as well. But I think our state is in good shape, relatively low unemployment. We do have high healthcare costs. That is a, burden on everyone. We went through the property tax discussion last year, but I'm looking for, just like I did in my own business, what are our attributes, build upon them, differentiate Indiana, from our other 49 competitors.
In terms of big challenges, you mentioned the property tax discussion, and you hear a lot of hue and cry in communities around the state. How are we going to raise the money we need? Your reaction to it, where do you see that discussion going?
So here's where, running a business for 37 years, and I always say it this simple, why it was harder running a business than being either in the Senate or governor. There's only one government. You're the monopoly. Your revenues are given to you, and they generally go up every year by 2 to 4%. So you're left with, how do you create value and how well you run your state through its own enterprise, which is a $23 billion a year enterprise. So challenges will be what comes at you. Right now, it's the high cost of electricity. It would have been property taxes, the year I was running. And we got a bill that didn't get crafted until the very end of session. And other than the two opposing groups, where one thought we did too much to restrict revenue, schools and local governments, I think I just asked them to look at how to run your operations more efficiently. You can't expect them to always go up. You can't get extra normal income because you never should grow government faster than the growth of your economy. And ironically, that's only 2 to 2.5% in most years. So we deal with the challenges. We'll get through them, but then how do you create things that are going to be different for your own citizens to build a business, raise a family? And there, when I chose to move back to my hometown and in a hard scrabble way, went through that crucible for the first 17 years and then figured out how to scale it, how to grow it. Same kind of thinking here. So the challenges that we're confronting are going to be, how can we keep prospering when That's the largest part of our economy, the healthcare system. It's approaching 20% of the GDP here and in other states. I fixed it in my own business 17 years ago by focusing on wellness and prevention, not expensive remediation, and created healthcare consumers out of my own employees. Think of that in terms of how we'll be creative through our own state government. And that experience of knowing how government works, 6 years in D.C., they've got their own issues to figure out. We talked about a little that earlier before we did the interview. Try to spend less than you take in each year and maybe defend the country, fix the entitlement programs, and do your portion of infrastructure. They've got way beyond it. I was the loudest voice on trying to fix it there. One reason I came back here is we control our own destiny, and I think more responsibility will be given to enterprising states over time, and obviously you should probably do less at the federal level.
What's your message to cities who are freezing, cutting back, those types of things? Where does this go? Where does this end?
So when I always ask them, would you ever want your local governments, your school districts to grow faster than the economy? It causes them to think, well, what do you mean? I said, well, if you're asking for that, you're growing that at the expense of the real economy. So remember, your revenues are given to you by the taxpayer. Focus on productivity, how you run things better, and know in the real world that you have ups and downs. You have competitors. You've got to make sure you're actually running a business that somebody wants to buy the product. Here, find out how to do things more efficiently and realize you're always going to be given a revenue stream that keeps you healthy. You can't get used to the fact that $8.7 billion was put into our state economy, every penny of which we borrowed to help state, local governments, and schools. Now you have to get back to the way things were working pre-COVID. They all know how to do it. You'll take a little getting used to when the revenue sources were a little less rigorous. We'll get back on track and we'll be okay. And they'll find ways to do it.
You talk about challenges. How about opportunities? What do you see as maybe Indiana from a business standpoint, greatest opportunity?
So we've got a pretty good business climate. We have one of the best environments for small businesses, yet we have some of the fewest startups percentage-wise. So my goal, and I came from small business and know how to grow it into a medium-sized and large business, is make sure we have the environment correct there in terms of state government policy. Focus on the different areas of our state. I ran on that idea of regional development. That's just been kind of affirmed by a study that was done recently. And then growing our existing businesses, fertilize the field of small businesses, make sure we're getting the best of what all other states want. And that would be the bigger enterprises that are going to give you a big boost on capital expenditures, therefore assessed value, and give us the highest paying jobs. And then make sure that we're not overlooking by getting education wrong on keeping kids from maybe taking a pathway that pays them more over a lifetime without a college degree. And that's called workforce. And you're seeing a lot of kids looking at that. My brother Steve ran the Department of Workforce Development for a few years during the Pence administration. High demand, high wage jobs. How can you get them so parents and kids can see them and get either the college pathway that'll get you there and probably even more likely a workforce pathway that we probably haven't given enough attention to until just recently. And I'm going to try to get that over the finish line.
You have just launched, speaking of workforce, this week, Power Up Indiana, which is a workforce initiative focused, as I see it, really on businesses and putting the onus on business to upscale their workforce. How does it work, and why is it different than other things that have been tried?
So this is the idea of how do you get those better paying jobs that you need, getting people recruited into them. Don't overlook, and I did that the entirety. We didn't use recruiters. We're the lowest unemployment county and town probably in the state, Du Bois County and Jasper. So we always had to grapple with that issue. If you pay an excellent wage and you've got upward mobility, in other words, your company is on the move, you got good benefits, and we fixed the healthcare component, people will come to you. And don't overlook the resource. If you're needing something that's a little above that notch, is upskill them to do it and then replenish into the job that your own employee might have given up to take on this new opportunity. When you're in a low unemployment state like we are, upskilling just means don't overlook your own resource. I can guarantee you, most of us companies, if you've got the get up and go, you show you got the aptitude, we'd probably pay for your college degree if you needed it for a certain job. Or either we do the training to upskill you so you can move within your own company. Mm-hmm. Don't overlook the resource right in front of us. And then if we do things well, generally, we're already getting a lot of Illinoisans to move into our state. And we were the only state in the top 10 in the north part of the country that had net migration into it, mostly because of Illinois. And we're going to get people moving into our state if we can get this stuff right. And my goal is, how do we keep kids from moving out of the state? So this is all clear with the policies we put in place to stay here, to raise your family, find a career, start a business.
As you look at the Indiana Economic Development Corporation, which has driven economic development for a number of years, you ordered a forensic audit of the agency.
Yep.
Where does that stand? How do you view IEDC now?
I think it's a necessity, but I think it has to be cloaked in daylight, not in to where you can't see what's going on. That was something that we had to do because it was brought up from the prior administration. These are things they may not have thought was going to be important, but there were some things that needed more daylight, more transparency. I think the audit's going to show that we need to do things a little differently. And I think we're going to find some things that were done well. So we'll make sure going forward it's transparent, so you're not getting the benefit of the doubt, and look for what was working well and then weave in some new stuff to do. And again, keep in mind small business, regional development, and our existing businesses, as opposed to just trying to lure new businesses into the state. We're going to try to do all three well.
How do you balance transparency with that need to do business kind of at the speed of business, if you will? Is that a balancing act?
I think when it comes to that, I feel confident that we'll be able to have our cake and eat it too. Sometimes if you make it too rigorous, you got to be, this is just on the basics, like open up your books, your ledgers, not so much on the process. We want to see that too. And that'd be one of the challenges to where I think the public now is interested in seeing it. And you'll have to craft a way that doesn't have that hamstring your ability to move when 3 or 4 other states might be interested in that entity. Hedge your bets, fertilizing the field of small business. You're not having to recruit businesses that are here already. And we got one of the best ones in Eli Lilly, would be one of the top 10 in the country. And they're interested in doing as much here. And they've already proven that here recently. So new paradigm, I think they all three blend together. And I'm always going to be transparent in the process.
You mentioned Main Street businesses and a focus on Main Street business. How do you define a Main Street business?
So I think one of the issues why we're not recording more new businesses is mine would have never been recorded. There was no private equity. There was sweat equity. And many of our businesses get started in the back room of some other business or in the garage. I want to make sure that when you are doing that, there will be some state resources there in terms of expertise, guidance, and even to that first step when it goes beyond sweat equity to where you need a banking relationship or a first level of outside investors. So I think getting that there for small business Main Street is something many feel they're out there on their own. And again, maybe that's because we focus too much on the other side of the ledger. Here, I think I'll be able to strike that right balance because I really lived all three of those. It was 17 years with 20 employees. And then from 98 to 08, we grew from 20 to 300 with about 10 locations. And then from 08 to the present, I had to give up the job of running it. When I was sworn in as senator, we became a national company with locations across the country. And there's a different probably formula for all three, but you can do all three because we've got every level of that kind of business. I want to make sure all get attention.
You mentioned with respect to IEDC, ultimately doing things maybe a little differently. Any thoughts on what that might entail?
I think that's going to mostly focus around the fact that it won't be just looking at luring in large businesses, but we are open for business. And I'm going to have an eye, I think, better than most governors have had, because how many governors have run a business or signed the front side of a paycheck? I mean, you might have to go back to Bob Orr from Evansville, as his primary occupation. It'll be easier to see what we need because we come from the arena, and I'm going to have great individuals around me reorganizing state government, put us in a much better shape to attend to all of our needs around those 8 policy silos. I've got individuals leading them with great private sector experience and government experience. So I think we're going to get to do a lot more things in terms of how we reorganize state government to be agile, attentive, and keeping an eye out on what Hoosiers need.
When we return, the governor weighs in on the future of data centers in Indiana and why he's excited about the potential of a quantum corridor. That's when the Business and Beyond podcast returns.
At PNC Bank, we're committed to making a difference in the lives of our customers and communities by helping them move forward financially. As a Main Street bank, we try to do right by our customers with every encounter. Our local teams offer personalized financial advice to help guide you in making the best decision. We're proud to be part of your community. PNC Bank. See how we can make a difference for you at pnc.com. Copyright 2022, the PNC Financial Services Group, Inc., all rights reserved.
We build Indiana. The Laborers International Union of North America are men and women building roads and bridges to get Hoosiers where they're going today and a new energy infrastructure that will keep Indiana competitive tomorrow. LIUNA's over 12,000 statewide members also grow local economies, earning good union wages, shopping where they live and work, and paying taxes. We build Indiana for good jobs and stronger communities. The Laborers International Union of North America. We are LIUNA.
From breaking news to in-depth articles, discover the advantage of the unlimited access to all news from IBJ and Inside Indiana Business with our limited time trial. Get started now at ibj.com/trial offer.
Welcome back to a special bonus edition of the Business and Beyond podcast presented by PNC, my extended conversation with Indiana Governor Mike Braun. And we continue with his view on data centers. As you look at investment in data centers all over the country, Indiana, one of those states viewed as kind of a hub for those data centers, big dollar investment, but increasingly you're seeing communities maybe push back a little. What's your view on data centers, the future of data centers in Indiana?
They're going to be essential if we want to be a player in AI, and we developed AI. I've never seen anything where the creators of it said, be careful with it, and have invited regulation. I can tell you our big geopolitical competitors are going to try to get there before we do. And in case of China, they're building all kinds of electric generating capacity and not worrying about how they're doing it for that one reason. So data centers use a lot of juice, electricity, and a lot of water. And most people would be surprised that before they came along, we were only producing 20 gigawatts of electricity for all households and businesses. I couldn't believe it when I heard a data center can use up to a gigawatt. That's a lot for one enterprise. No one has it available. No state does. I'm going to try to be the leading state on getting small modular reactors because they seem to be the best source of baseload that is going to be 8 to 10 years away. In the meantime, it's going to be getting more life out of your coal units, expediting natural gas, and doing wind and solar where you can, but 70 of our counties have moratoria on them. And that's where they're analogous to the data centers because we only have water in basically the northern third of the state to spare or along the Ohio River. I told you how difficult it is to get electric generation online. And we got to make sure that our current businesses, our households, our neighborhoods aren't having to pay more as we do it. That's why I've asked for, earlier we talked about, I think, utility rates. If not, that's a big issue. We need to make sure that those don't go up when there's such a voracious appetite for it by data centers.
Yeah. As you look at, so you see Indiana as continuing to be a hub for data centers. You think
as long as they are going to be willing to pay for most of the electricity, if not all of it, and maybe even a little additional to put back on the grid. Otherwise, it will exacerbate what's now been a course of complaints that our utility rates are too high. And on utility rates, I'm just going to make sure there's a fair balance between the generators and the ratepayers.
As you look at opportunities, we touched on data centers, but advanced manufacturing, all the different sectors, a newer economy, kinds of things. Where do you see opportunity for Indiana?
Biosciences, chip factories, obviously, they use a lot of electricity and water too, probably second only to data centers. I see this whole idea of a quantum corridor that would stretch from just inside the Indiana border, taking advantage of the third largest market in the country. But with our universities, with Crane down, now is really being looked to throughout the Defense Department as a leading edge technology center. But if you take the region down to Lafayette, Indianapolis, Bloomington, and put the terminus maybe at Crane, there is a lot going on in that quantum corridor technology that is ripe for the taking, in my opinion. And I feel real good about how to get from here to there.
What needs to happen? Because you mentioned it, and certainly there's excitement, I know, in Northwest Indiana for this quantum corridor and how it could ultimately come down through Purdue and Indianapolis, et cetera. What needs to happen to make that a reality?
Well, we'll need our fair share of data centers even for that, beyond crunching through all the algorithms that apply to AI. AI obviously is going to be an important part of whatever we do in the technological world. So it is going to be a unique job for me to be able to coordinate all those diverse interests into that idea. And that happened, I think, mostly due to the weather and randomly out in California and in Massachusetts due to probably the universities have had those markets cornered. I think they're going to be less and less attractive in an enterprising entrepreneurial state with a governor that understands most aspects of it, from the government side to especially the entrepreneurial side. I think we're sitting in the catbird seat to get it done.
What do you see as the role of higher education in this whole process, whether it's the Ivy Techs and Vincenzas of the world or the public and private institutions here that are very substantial?
Number one, it's got to get better at getting more individuals completed on the journey. Right now, half the kids that get guided into higher ed don't make it to the finish line. A lot of times the degrees weren't well guided. They weren't into STEM degrees. We overproduce almost everything. We underproduce the most important degree, STEM. Get it balanced. Be honest with parents and kids. We talked about workforce earlier. We're going to need degrees that play into this new paradigm of our economy. And we don't want to be forcing kids into a degree just because that was the mantra from the 40s and 50s, and we know it worked a long time. there are more jobs ready for the taking now. It's probably 130,000 post-COVID compared to what it was before, which was about 65,000. Better skills, apprenticeships, things you do, middle school through high school, that when it comes to the cash flow of life, you'd be better off filling them first. And then realigning the college education to the high demand, high wage careers that we've talked about. Some of the things that I've asked already universities to do, the public ones, sharpen up your curriculum to make sure we're not exporting kids due to bad guidance into the basement because they can't find a job here, but they want to stay in Indiana or out of state to find a job. Get that done better. That's supply and demand, and be willing to change into a new strategy long term.
Final question for you. As you look at the story of the Indiana economy, looking out over the course of maybe the next year or so, don't know what's going to happen exactly at the national level, certainly, but how do you see, what do you think the story of the Indiana economy is going to be over the course of the next year?
Over the next year, and let's just say 3.5 years, and then maybe beyond that, it's going to be based upon a three-legged stool of fertilizing the field of small businesses, further enabling the ones that are already planted here, and then getting the best of the businesses to build out that quantum corridor and pay those highest salaried and wage jobs. And we're set to do that. The budget was an aberration based upon tariffs, which that's working through the system. We'll get through that. Indiana is the biggest manufacturing state per capita. We wrestle with Wisconsin on that honor, and we want to make sure that economy gets revitalized. We got great partners across the world that come here to actually bring their factories here. We'll do more of that, and it'll be the total mix of all that that nudges us from a 2% economy up to maybe a 3 to 3.5. And like I told you earlier, whenever you're getting close to 3, you're knocking it out of the park. And then my fear is that we don't have to deal with the drag from that place I worked for 6 years prior to becoming governor. And I think most of this, if we do it well, we can chart our own independence despite what happens there, because it'll have to fix itself, because we've all got that opportunity to distinguish ourselves among the other 49, and I feel good about that.
My Statehouse conversation with Indiana Governor Mike Braun. Thanks for joining us for this special bonus edition of the Business and Beyond podcast presented by PNC. And a reminder, you can listen to all of our episodes and get Indiana business news 24/7 at InsideIndianaBusiness.com. I'm Gerry Dick. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time. From broadcast to podcast, Inside Indiana Business with Gerry Dick is now available anytime on YouTube or in your podcast feed. Subscribe and listen wherever you get your podcast or at ibjpodcast.com.
The IBJ Media Podcast Network is the soundtrack of a growing state. Indiana is on the move, and you can hear it happening on the IBJ Media Podcast Network. We bring you the voices at the center of our economy, our courts, our companies, and our communities. Subscribe now and be part of the conversation that's building Indiana's future. Find all of our shows by searching IBJ Media in your podcast app or visit ibjpodcasts.com.